At the banquet, he publicly announced I could never give him a child and raised his glass. He toasted his new marriage, his pregnant wife, and the baby everyone already treated like victory. I stood only a few steps behind him, holding my drink, close enough to hear every word. Everyone laughed and congratulated him for finally starting over with someone younger and more promising. They said he had finally escaped what they called a failed marriage and wasted years. No one turned around to look at me as if I had never existed there. My name is Emily Grant, his wife for 15 years, erased carefully by his own hands. I was the woman they forgot, the one edited out of every story. They remembered his success, his company, his influence, and the glowing future everyone suddenly admired. They remembered his beautiful pregnant wife and the child already making him seem complete to them. But they did not remember I had once been part of his life. They did not remember the company's first proposals had been drafted by me and not him. They did not remember that when he was broke, I was the one holding everything together. They did not remember that house because I had supervised every inch of it myself. They remembered only one thing: I had not given him a child. So in their eyes, that meant I deserved to be replaced. The day we divorced, he held me and whispered that he was sorry. He said, "Emily, you'll have a better life someday," and I almost believed him. The next morning, I brought soup to his office building and saw him enter with another woman. Her stomach was slightly round and his hand rested there protectively, almost tenderly like a promise. That careful tenderness was something he had never once given me. I stood across the street watching them disappear inside, unseen and completely unnecessary. No one looked back. No one even noticed I was standing there. That was when I understood this was not the ending I had imagined. It was the moment I had been fully and cleanly replaced. The day I moved out, the whole house felt hollow and cold. Only his assistant came to help with the last of my luggage. He was young, quiet, and efficient, the kind of man who moved without wasting words. He carried each box downstairs, one after another, never asking anything and never offering comfort. I watched him and suddenly asked, "Do you want me to take care of you?" He stopped, looked at me once, and answered simply, "Okay," without hesitation or confusion. I panicked instead, saying it had been impulsive, and he should pretend he never heard it. He gave no answer and only kept carrying boxes as though nothing unusual had happened. After the divorce, I did not know how to live anymore. On the first day, I walked through a grocery store and bought all his favorite ingredients. At the register, I suddenly remembered there was no one left to cook for. I went home, made a pot of soup, and poured every last drop away. The second day, I sat by the window, replaying him and her endlessly in my head. They were together, they had a baby coming, they had a future, and I had nothing. On the third day, I went to his company and the receptionist stopped me downstairs. "You're not on the list," she said, polite enough to make it feel worse. Then she added, "His wife is already inside and she met her, not me." Someone recognized me and whispered, "Isn't that the ex-wife?" Another voice followed, "She couldn't even give him a kid." They looked at me the way people look at stories that ended badly. I ran to the restroom and stared at my reflection until my own face looked unfamiliar. I called him and told him I missed him and I still wanted him. He said, "Don't come here again. She's pregnant, don't stress her, you should understand." Then he hung up and immediately transferred money, paying me to disappear for good. I did not cry then. I just became clear in a way I never had. I was not lacking, I had simply been used like a tool. That night, I walked into a bar filled with noise, dim lights, strangers, and careless laughter. Someone looked at me and said, "Ma'am, you look lost," and people around him smiled. I said nothing. Then I found him there, the assistant who had helped me move out. I walked straight to him and asked, "Do you still want that?" This time, he did not hesitate. He pulled me into his arms immediately. For 1 second, the whole room went silent around us. It was the first time I had not been abandoned but chosen. I left with him that night, and the next morning I sent him money. He texted back, "Thanks," and I laughed at my phone for the first time. From that day on, I started dismantling the life I had lived for him. I threw away the modest, careful clothes I had worn to fit his world. I bought dresses I had never before allowed myself to wear. I changed homes, changed routines, and changed the way I moved through life. I started acting, taking the smallest roles first, and no one knew who I was. But slowly, people started remembering my face without attaching me to his name. I was no longer someone else's extension or decorative sacrifice. Later, at another formal dinner, I saw him again across a crowded room. Everyone surrounded her, praising her youth, her pregnancy, and the easy promise of motherhood. And while they praised her, they casually insulted me, calling me old and useless. He stood there and said nothing to stop them. When I entered, the whole room went quiet for a breath. They stared at me, unsure whether they were really seeing me correctly. Even he looked stunned, as though I had stepped out of a past life. I stood there, no longer the woman they thought they had buried. I said only, "Call me Emily," and then I walked away. He followed me outside and asked how I was getting home tonight. I told him my driver was waiting. He tried to say more. I cut him off and said, "She's waiting for you." He stood there speechless for the first time in years. Later, he stopped me outside his office building and said, "You came back for me." I slapped him before he could finish whatever fantasy he was building. Then he said, "Who else do you even have?" Before I answered, a voice behind me said, "She's with me." He walked over, stood beside me, and pulled me gently into his arms. "Emily is mine," he said, right there in front of everyone watching. The crowd went silent, and suddenly all attention turned toward my ex-husband instead. He fired him on the spot, calling him a man living off a woman. He smiled, tossed back his badge, and said, "She takes care of me, I like that." People started whispering again, but this time they were not looking at me. They were looking at him, and for once he was the spectacle. His face changed because it was the first time he had been publicly exposed. Later, his baby was lost, and then his marriage collapsed after that. His company started failing too, one problem after another, as if everything had finally cracked. He came to me and said he wanted to start over again. I looked at him and finally understood something with absolute certainty. He had never loved me. He had only needed me. So I said no and turned away without giving him anything else. That time I did not look back. Later, I had a child with the man who had stayed beside me throughout everything. He never left, not once, not when I was broken or rebuilding. Years later, my ex appeared at my front door, his hair half gone gray. He looked at my daughter and asked if things were different. I did not let him finish. I closed the door in his face. He stood outside for a long time, and I stayed inside listening to my daughter laugh. In that moment, I finally understood I had never truly been the one replaced. I was simply the woman who had finally at last been seen.